there we go. Speaking of Arsenal, Gabriel, he's out. His hamstring is gone. He's going to be out for the rest of the season.
The third hamstring surgery they've had to have this season.
It is, yeah. It's the third hamstring surgery that they're having. I've seen some people online state that this is due to players being overplayed too much football, or is this down to Arteta, the doctors, and the training? Like, what's to blame here, in your opinion, Henry?
I think you can blame the Saka one, because coming on like games and you're 3-0 against Preston and coming on against Bolton when he probably should have been rested. And of course you want your best player to play every single game, but I don't really see how the Gabriel one's on Arteta. Like, it's unfortunate, but then it's like every team in the league gets injuries. I mean, me and George have had more hamstring injuries than everyone on this panel combined this season, right? But the Arteta one is different because the intensity they play is completely different to, for instance, the Spurs. Our centre-backs are doing 25, 30-yard sprints every game, whereas they're really not, because they control games better than we do. But to say this is completely on Arteta and, you know, to put it into the other group of injuries they've had, I don't really subscribe to that. I think this one's just unfortunate. I mean, yeah, the third hamstring injury this season. The other one, Havertz got in a training session. I mean, that's not nowhere near the same intensity as a game, is it? That's just unfortunate. That's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. But yeah, I thought I'd obviously, being an Arsenal fan, I'd give my opinion on it. So I'm assuming you're going to give your opinion on it as well, Terry. But yeah, I don't think that one is on Arteta.
The way you got to look at it is, naturally we've been seeing, with the amount of games there are, every team suffering. Hamstring injuries are like one of the most common injuries nowadays, especially in the Premier League. Like the intensity that all the teams are playing at, you're seeing so many hamstring surgeries happen. I think Spurs have had like 3 or 4 hamstring surgeries in the last 12 months as well. So I think it's very common at this moment in time. But there is a point of when a manager does have to take responsibility for his players' well-being. And there has been plenty of times, especially Saka, I would say, because I don't look at it across this season. I think Arsenal have been very lucky across the last 2 to 3 years when they was challenging that. Gabriel, Saliba, they all had minor injuries, Saka, but no one picked up a major injury in that time. In those years, similar to when Liverpool went on that run, they went a few years and you had your key players just there. But after that, once you get to a certain point, those players, their bodies are going to break down on them. Arteta hasn't helped when, you know, he's playing these players against the likes of Preston, when they're 7-1 up against PSV, and he's continuing to use the likes of Gabriel and Saliba, knowing, do you know what, 7-1 up, and I get it's Champions League tie, but 7-1 up at our home ground. Maybe we can throw Kivior in there with a youngster or with a player that just needs some minutes, you know, build up some confidence. So I think he hasn't helped the situation. I don't think it's fair to blame it on Arteta, because injuries happen, it's part of the game. But he's definitely not helped the situation for Arsenal.
I mean, the Gabriel one, all the stuff that Arsenal fans have been saying is the reason why it doesn't necessarily apply to the Gabriel one. Like, Arsenal have incredible defensive depth in terms of the sheer amount of players that can play centre-back if needs be. Sometimes it is just unlucky. A lot of muscle injuries are just a bit unlucky. You know, Gabriel has played a lot of football, but you'd want him to play the football that he has done. It's just unfortunate. I feel like sometimes there's no grand sort of mistake or grand sort of ulterior thing. Sometimes you just get unlucky with a hamstring injury. Sometimes you just get unlucky with a muscle injury. Saliba a couple of years ago, they got unlucky with that injury. Is it annoying that it's happened when it's happened? Is it annoying that it's the third this season? Yes, but I don't think the Gabriel one is the one where you're looking at it going, oh, that's down to the manager. He's overplayed them. He's done this. He's done that. I think it's just, you know, the Gabriel one and the Havertz one as well. You know, there wasn't much you could do with Havertz. He didn't have that. That's when we look at the depth. The Gabriel one is just unlucky. You wouldn't have. I guarantee every Arsenal fan going into that game yesterday wasn't sitting there going, "Oh, we might need to take Gabriel out here. He might get an injury this game." Everyone's going, "No, you can play. He's in good form. Played a lot of minutes, you keep playing him." That's the difference.
what are you saying about this, Josh? Because we've seen Big Ange get a lot of criticism for his injuries. Arteta's getting pelters, but we haven't seen, for instance, Pep Guardiola this season be blamed for the injuries they have had. So, why is it that the media and football fans at large seem to pick and choose which managers they blame for injuries and which ones they call it bad luck to? Like, how do you see the situation?
So, the first thing I think of when I think Gabriel, I don't think Gabriel out for the season. I think of Gabriel out for Real Madrid because that's all Arsenal's season is now. If we're being real, it's 2 games, right? That's Arsenal's season. So in the grand scheme of things, Arsenal not having him for the Premier League is no big deal, in my opinion. They're not going to drop out of the top 4. Their season is pretty much flatlined. But it comes to your point, Terry, of what is this? Is it that there is a problem with Arsenal in terms of behind the scenes maintaining injuries, rotation, and why is it that it falls on Arteta? Personally, as you said, there are certain narratives and agendas that fit a certain fan base. If you're trying to drive a manager out, some of the things you're going to look at is injuries. Oh, we don't look after our players well. Oh, the training methods are too vigorous. Oh, we've got a squad depth problem, which you can go to the board. But what you never hear is, for example, when I think of Arsenal, why don't we hear about the suspensions they've had this season? The ill discipline of the red cards, where they miss players for 3 games. Why don't we hear about that sort of narrative? And with Manchester City, for example, they don't have those problems. They solely have been relying on from the first minute of first game of the season is we've had no Rodri. That's why Manchester City potentially have had that sort of off the hook card. Would you say with Pep because Rodri didn't even get to kick a ball for them. So already there's a sympathy card out for Pep Guardiola because it wasn't even in his hands. But do I think that, as people have highlighted in the chat, that Arteta's made some criminal decisions, such as playing Gabriel after being 7-1 up on aggregate? Absolutely. Well, that's got to come down to a manager in some sense. But on the other sense, how outraged would Arsenal fans and neutral fans be if he didn't play? And they did rotate. All of a sudden, Arteta doesn't take these competitions seriously. Arteta will never be that serial. Arteta will never be that winner. He'll never win trophies because he doesn't take these games important. We showed lack of respect. Do you know what I mean? So, I think that it depends on your narrative of who you want to blame at your football club for your downfalls. Clearly, Tottenham fans want to blame Ange right now, so they're going to put all the pressure on Ange Postecoglou's management of said players potentially. And I feel the same with Arsenal fans. There is that section of the fan base who want to drive this manager out, so it's on him apparently of why these are happening.
Yeah, look, I think it's some great points raised by everybody, and I think that the word balance is needed in this because you have to look. There's a super chat that explains this very well. But it says prior to this week, there was 71 hamstring injuries this season where players have been out for over a month. There's 71 players or 71 incidences of players missing a month or more because of hamstring injuries. Arsenal having 4, it's not an outlier. So it's not as though Arsenal are getting more of these than anybody else. A season or 2 ago, and this happened again, by the way, to Standards FC's God, Real Madrid as well. Look at the volume of cruciate knee ligament injuries that were happening. And it felt almost eeringly weird, the volume that were coming through. And I can go back as far as when I was at school over 20 years ago, where every fucker for about 2 years broke their metatarsal. I can't remember the last time someone did it, personally, right? I just think there's a mixture of things here. The Saka situation, I feel, is carrying injuries for a while. Hindsight's lucrative. The club should have turned around and went, you know what? We're going to send you for the minor surgery or give you a period of time where you're not playing. We're going to rest you because your body is... I mean, he was getting laughed at for limping, but I think his body was just in bits. But a lot of athletes get like that. I think Kai Havertz and Gabriel's just happened. A little bit of fluke in there. Also, we cannot ignore the volume of football. When players maybe 3 or 4 years ago started complaining about the amount of games they were playing, a lot of us just said, loser mentality, I work 6 days a week, I could do it. But you're now hearing like the winners and the legends talk about it's ridiculous and there is no time for training. And what a lot of the experts and the doctors and the science behind it is saying is that because there's no time for training, the muscles are not getting time to recover properly. So it's game rest, and that's bad for the muscles. And that's why there has been in the last 3 seasons, I think, exponential growth on muscular injuries. So I think there's absolutely areas where you can condemn and say Arteta and the Cronkies, you haven't built a big enough or good enough squad. Maybe that's why Arteta doesn't rotate enough. Arteta's got to rotate a little bit more. At the same time, I don't think you can ignore the wider issues in the game that are affecting multiple teams and just put it all on Big Ange, put it all on Arteta, put it all on Ten Hag when he was here for the injuries, because that's crazy. Plus, as well, sometimes some players are just injury prone. You know, you look at Mason Mount. Is it Amarim's fault he's been out injured? No. Do I blame Ten Hag? No, because he was getting injuries at the back end of his Chelsea career. He's just a dud. He shouldn't have bought the geezer. Luke Shaw, he's always injured, like from our perspective.
When was the last time Luke Shaw played for United? It feels like every time he's about to come back from an injury, he tweaks it again.
It was February 2024. He hasn't played for over a year. And
Terry, what do you put down Tottenham's injuries to? Because out of that 74, we've had 11 hamstring injuries this season.
So again, you guys play in a way where if you look at Van der Ven as an example, because of your higher line and the amount of running he has to do, you sit there and you think to yourself, maybe that plays a part. Maybe that's played a part in it. I think the reason Big Ange gets so much criticism for his high line is because 1, you've seen players get injured in it. 2, it doesn't need to be that fucking high, and you would probably look a better team if it was a little bit deeper anyway. So I think it's a combination of those 2 things. Arsenal's team often play with quite a high intensity, and that isn't me giving you that opinion. That's listening anecdotally to players that play against them that say the players just move, they run, they're here, they're there, they're everywhere. But that appears a different type of intensity in sprinting compared to your defenders in Andy's high line, because it's not as noticeable because it's within the game state. So that's where I think you need to look at it and go, well, football isn't going to reduce the amount of games. What Arsenal need to do is build a stronger squad so that Arteta is more comfortable rotating. So what you have to look for as football clubs are solutions to this. But what I would say, there seems to be a crazy number of hamstring injuries this season compared to normal. But as I stated right at the start of my little bit here, is I felt that was similar to cruciate knee ligament injuries a couple of years ago. And we have to be very mindful that we can't just blame one manager for his team getting loads of injuries and then actually give another manager sympathy and say it's okay to come 5th, 6th, 7th this year because you had injuries, mate, but you're a great manager. We have to at least try and be balanced in our analysis, I think. We're not Sky fucking Sports, do you know what I mean? We've got to try and do it better over here. A few comments here. Saka didn't even play in the 7-1. George, nonsense.
I didn't say Saka, I said Gabriel.
He's talking about Gabriel. Yeah, he was saying Gabriel there, to be fair. This here, I didn't see the super chat from George. It says, Arteta said a couple of weeks ago that due to the volume of games, there's barely training in between games. So the muscle doesn't have enough time to recover, which increases the risk of injuries. It's a football issue. I think that certainly plays a part. And I remember doing a show with Lee Gunner. Somebody was complaining about too many games, and I was in the same mindset as Lee. It's just like an average player at a club struggling, moaning, loser. And then I remember before he joined Man United, Rafael Varane started talking about it. And I'm like, well, you can't put Varane in that loser category. Do you know what I'm saying? And there's something in it when the stars of the game are saying there isn't enough rest time. What I would say, though, as well, is where I don't have sympathy with the clubs is City and Chelsea have just put themselves into another fucking tournament. Like Man United are going on a postseason and pre-season tour. So the clubs are also responsible here. We can't just say it's football doing it. Our clubs are committing to these things as well. So I think it's a bit of a mix.
I also think that clubs need to start taking strength and conditioning coaches more serious. I think that what you're talking about in terms of that rest game time, this is where your S&C coaches come in as a real viable asset of your team. And I've just interestingly looked at who's had the fewest Premier League injuries this season or missed the least amount of minutes. It's actually Nottingham Forest. So I've just been having a little bit of a stalk of their strength and conditioning coach and their backroom team of strength and conditioning coaches. And it's they've got basically a 5-a-side football team in strength and conditioning. They've got so many people in there, and the head guy has a really interesting background. I just think that's something the science behind football is even bigger now with that, and I think it's such a key element of what you're saying because of the fixtures.
I mean, this season we've done really well in the injury front. Bar, a couple of guys, we always get injured. We've done quite well on the injury front compared to last year. And this summer, Arnie Slot brought in this Ruben Pieces fella. We didn't have a guy in that sort of higher role before, but this year he's been there, and recovery's been different. And for the first time ever, Canati started over half the league games in the season. He's never done that before, but we've now got that this year, and he's only had one real layoff, and it was a contact injury. So it's like stuff like that. It goes a long way with teams, and the one thing that the only way I see it changing is if the football rule makers and the organizations, they're not going to get rid of the games because games make them money. So the only way it changes now is if teams are allowed to have bigger squads.
Well, yeah, I mean, they've already got. I mean, they've got big squads, 7 subs. They can make 5. They've made those changes. That it's more money being spent by the clubs. Like you think about Chelsea and City are going to bring in 50 to 100 million pound extra. Where some of that money should be going is making that squad deeper as much as better, so they can handle the games.
I think the bigger problem is the managers. Like we have 22, like most managers have 25-man squads. They just choose to work with 15 to 16 players because naturally with managers, there's only, you can't focus on a full 25-man squad. It's hard to keep track of all these players. No. So they tend to keep a core group, and that's where the biggest issue is. You need to make your core group bigger and have more strength in depth, because look at Arsenal right now with this Gabriel injury. We always talk about how great Arsenal are at the back and defensively they're like got so many players there, but with Gabriel now out, you're looking around, you're like, oh, who is going to pair Saliba in there?